Welcome back to BLOCKTV. This is Crypto Crunch. Today we are joined from Helsinki by Finance Magnates Rachel McIntosh. Hi, Rachel. How are ya?
I'm doing well, Aran. How about yourself?
I'm doing great. It's great to have you on to kind of break these down. So part of the stories that you sent in here, one of them is the Bakkt story. Now there's a lot going on with Bakkt, whether it be the PR fiasco, I would call it a fiasco that went on just a couple of weeks ago, where there was like a yes, no thing going on, which you kind of described beautifully. But can you, so one of the points that you're making here is kind of this impact on the market. There have been so many delays. Is this even relevant? What is the impact now? Please break it down for us.
Right, exactly. So interestingly, when this was launched originally, or I guess announced about a year ago, the markets really didn't react very much at all. And that could also be because the timing coincided with the SEC's rejection of the Gemini Bitcoin ETF that was happening right around the same time. This time around, however, we have seen a major boost in the crypto markets that has coincided with the timing of the announcement that this will be launched on September 23rd. So from the 16th to the 17th of August, we saw a bump from around $9,880 in the Bitcoin valuation, and now it's around 10,410. So as we know, that 10,000 mark is kind of a big psychological deal for investors. If we can manage to get that past that point, then there's a chance that we could see some further upward motion.
Right, but so, I mean, within this kind of, I think the most interesting part about that is this still relevant? Do people still care about this happening, or do people care more? You mentioned the psychological aspect of going past 10. What about the psychological aspect of futures being passed and Bakkt actually happening as a platform for the year? Is this something that's still relevant to us?
Right, I see what you mean, Aran. So I think that what's happening is that, this has been anticipated for such a long time. This has been in the works for over a year now. So the crypto markets, the industry has changed quite a bit over that point. Crypto futures is a much bigger deal than it was back in that time, simply in terms of trading volume. There's a lot more platforms that are offering crypto futures trading these days. We've got futures trading on Binance. Even Kraken is trying to open up a futures trading platform at the moment. So yes and no. I mean, I think that it is still a big deal that the Intercontinental Exchange is launching this product. However, the market has already started to adapt without the Intercontinental Exchange's involvement at all. So we have all these other platforms being developed, as well as simply the fact that investors are starting to diversify into other kinds of cryptocurrency investments, perhaps hedge funds, also, in some cases, investing directly in cryptocurrency spot markets. Institutional investors, I should say.
Right, they found a way. Traders, people in the cryptosphere are resilient, let's say, in this new, or nascent is the buzzword everybody likes to use, technology,
yes,
and have kind of made a workaround here. And so let's move on, shift gears to Kick. Now this case, and they said initially when this lawsuit happened, they said we're going to go aggressive on this, and they were absolutely not joking. Could you please provide some background before we get into what this means for the sphere?
Yeah, absolutely. So as many of you probably know, the SEC accused Kick of selling unregistered securities. That's the short of it. The long of it, however, is that the SEC went above and beyond this accusation, and also in the filing painted Kick as this company that is like hungry for money and desperate, and is using this tokenization model as a kind of a quick last resort cash grab. So of course, Kick has taken not very kindly to this depiction of themselves. And the most recent example of this was this 131-page filing, which of course is response to the filing, which is par for the course. It's part of the legal proceedings in this kind of a case. But just as the SEC went above and beyond its purview to accuse Kick of being this really seedy company, Kick fired right back at the SEC and said, hey, you guys are twisting the facts, and this is not legally relevant, and it won't stand in court.
But even though they're going in aggressively, SEC is not backing down either. They're like, you will not set a precedent. We're the ones that need to do that. Now, that being said, we just a moment ago spoke about how this technology is super new, let's call it, and there's a lot of firsts going in. This is a huge case. What precedent does that set for the sphere?
Right, exactly. So the big deal in this, in terms of how the law is actually applied, is all about the Howey test. The Howey test is pretty vague. It's been applied, kind of on a case-by-case basis. We haven't seen something quite this scale yet within the cryptosphere. So whether or not the SEC decides that, in fact, these kin tokens are securities that were unregistered at their time of sale, could determine in the future what kinds of securities are, what kind of tokens are securities and are not securities.
Definitions. We need more definitions. It's what people said
Yes.
in the congressional hearings that went on with Libra, post Libra. That seems to be the main issue here. People are not clear on what's going on. I think regulators aren't clear either.
And it's kind of like, where do we draw the line? Because in this case, Kik talked about whether or not these tokens, would gain value at some point in the future. It was simply really just part of their conversations pre and post launch. There hasn't actually, if I'm please forgive me if I'm mistaken, there hasn't been any change in the valuation. It was just the fact that it was talked about that is called into question at this point.
He said, she said, SEC versus Kik. But moving on from one SEC issue to the others, I'm theorizing here, but I think it's a solid thing to say that the SEC is completely in the cryptosphere. They're part of every conversation. Maybe they don't consider themselves, but I'm going to say that they're part of the cryptosphere as a whole. But moving on to the SEC's custody and manipulation concerns still plaguing Bitcoin ETFs. Can you break that story down for us?
Yeah, exactly. So we've got yet another delay on our hands here. The SEC said it's going to postpone decisions on the VanEck SolidX ETF, the Bitwise ETF, and Wilshire ETF until, the first two until October, and then Wilshire will have to wait until September to see if there's another delay in store for them as well. So the CEOs of Bitwise and the VanEck SolidX team are optimistic. Of course, they kind of have to be, that this is going to get passed. But it's not super clear. These decisions are important on these two cases in particular because the SEC cannot delay its decisions for more than 240 days. And both of these decisions represent the end of those 240-day periods. In June, Jay Clayton, the chairman of the SEC, told CNBC that there are still concerns remaining around the passage of these, or the allowance of these Bitcoin ETFs, particularly surrounding market manipulation and custody. And not much has changed since June.
But so just kind of we spoke about this before within Bakkt. When we were speaking about futures, right? The cryptosphere is finding other ways to cope. Do we still care?
Yeah, that's the big question. It's like, an ETF would, theoretically bring in a number of new institutional into this space. However, lots of institutional investors are already kind of making their way into the space and have already made their way into the space through other products. ETFs are not yet available in the American market, but they are, for example, available in Europe and in the UK. And as well, as we said before, there are hedge funds. There was kind of a what should I say, like a cleansing of hedge funds in 2018. A bunch of them shut down as a result of the crypto winter being successful. But the ones that have lasted have actually shown themselves to be quite successful, even in the face of a bear market. So yeah, the industry is continuing to adapt even without this cryptocurrency ETF. Would it bring more institutional capital into this space? Probably. But would it have as big an effect as people are thinking about? Maybe not.
Yeah, and I'm theorizing here with you out loud. I've spoken to people who say that an ETF will happen when nobody cares about an ETF anymore completely, as in when it's off of our radars 100%, that's when the ETF will happen. Other people say people don't care anymore. We found ways around that. why do you think that the SEC, because Bitwise very plainly shared how closely they're working in tandem with the SEC to ensure that an ETF happened. Yet we find that there is another delay, and they cited the same reason for all three, basically saying we need more time to think this through. But then why continue delaying? Either reject this or accept.
Right, exactly. So it seems like the SEC is, kind of wants to make this happen. Like, it doesn't seem like they're totally opposed to the idea of a Bitcoin ETF, because if they were, they would have just asked this already. But it seems like, as you said, Bitwise made this amazing presentation when they submitted their application saying that, we have identified market manipulation, and basically, like, if we know about it, then it's not such a big problem. But the SEC is saying, well, simply knowing about something, it's like we can acknowledge it, but we actually do kind of have to stop that from happening and, create standards and tools and things that can be used to identify this in real time as it's happening. And those kinds of things are not yet in place for the SEC.
Right, now the SEC is trying to be big brother, operating as validator nodes, if I'm not mistaken, to kind of keep an eye on what's going on certain blockchains. Let's see what happens with that in the future. And then I think another theory with why they're not either rejecting or accepting would be that they don't want to be that bad guy who decided to say no and kind of take the candy away from everybody. But still developing, and we'll see what happens on those October and end of September dates, if I'm not mistaken. Thank you very much, Rachel McIntosh from Finance Magnates, for breaking that down for us. It was great to have you on. For all you folks watching on BLOCKTV.com, keep on watching for more cryptocurrency and blockchain-related news.
For more news and updates, follow us on Twitter.